Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Let's Talk Fortitude podcast. Before we get started, I want to give a few shout outs. This episode is sponsored by Pale Horse Coffee. Coffee first, coffee second. Visit palehorsecoffee.com and use promo code Forerunner at checkout to get your 15% off of your order. Pale Horse is a veteran-owned and operated coffee shop. They're awesome. We've actually shot podcasts there. And so if you would, visit them and please use your product code Forerunner at checkout for your 15% off. Also, I'd like to give a quick shout out to Forerunner Productions and Chad and Chase for all that they do for the podcast, all the different podcasts that we bring, that they produce and what they do. I couldn't do it without them. They keep me up and going and rolling and make me sound good, make me look good, do all that good stuff for me. And without them, I couldn't. Chad has. Also, I would like to give a quick shout out to Chad also for his book. He did a book signing at Pale Horse not too long ago and was awesome. And congratulations on that. Also, Cremoso Cheesecakes, Jason Hubbard and the Cremoso Cheesecake Company. Jason is awesome, is working with us some, and has a cheesecake food truck. The best cheesecake you ever made, man. Just a little old tiny cheesecake. It's awesome.
You eat the whole thing at once?
I eat the whole thing at once.
Okay, that's right. Single serving, right? That's what it is.
Oh, my goodness. So now you've heard his voice. My guest today is being heard and seen numerous times on the Big Show with John Boy and Billy, the Dave Ramsey Show. He delivered the commencement speech at the University of Mount Olive, was a guest on the Unashamed Podcast, where I saw this, my guest for the first time with Al and Phil Robertson. Jace was missing that day. Yep. You were filling his seat.
Yep.
And more importantly, he is the founder and CEO of Hwy55 Burgers, Shakes, and Fries, formerly Andy's. And I've got him here to tell his story, to share his struggles, his successes, to let folks know that the American dream is still alive and thriving today. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Kenney Moore. Kenny, welcome and thank you for coming on. Let's Talk Fortitude.
Oh, thank you guys so much for having me.
Man,
making the trip to Mount Olive, North Carolina to do this as well. You can actually take that off your bucket list now. Places to see before you die. You've done Mount Olive now, so now you can move on to Paris and whatever, after this. So
I got to tell you, and I thought about this when I told what it said. So Phil said, Kenny, may your burgers never burn. So when we pulled around, I said, so Kenny, may your pickle jar never be empty.
That's right.
Because Mount Olive Pickle Factory's right here next door to you.
We are still kind of the redheaded stepchild in this little town. The pickle plants got us. They just dominate here. So that's okay.
Cotton. The cotton fields are everywhere.
Well, no, this is eastern North Carolina. That's right.
Oh my goodness.
That's right. All kinds of smells at night and everything else. So.
Oh my goodness. So before we get started, I do want to tell everybody that first time that I saw Kenny, knew anything about him, was I saw you on the Unashamed Podcast with Al and Phil. And that's where they introduced your book on there that you've got. Al was talking about it. And after an hour hearing your story, I had to go out and get it. Well, what I found out whenever I read your book, there's a lot more to that story. Yeah. And I understand with them there's, that hour that they try to stay within. And I meant to tell you this earlier, don't feel rushed. If you have somewhere to go, I understand that. But if this runs over, whatever time it takes, we can split it into two different shows. I don't want to rush you. I want your story. I want to hear. I want to get in the weeds so that some of these other entrepreneurs that are out there will know our background. Our childhoods are a lot alike. Yours was your dad, mine was my mom. And I played underground in the coal mine when I'd have to double back with my dad at 8, 9 years old, like most kids played outside in their backyard. So anyway.
Had to take a shower at night too, didn't you?
Yeah. It was amazing. I could tell you a lot of stories.
Those stories will make us who we are, though. It's okay to struggle a little bit. So,
and this show has normally been, or originally was focused around veterans, which still falls under you because your stepdad was a veteran.
That's right.
He was.
That's
and
right.
I'm amazed. I would like for you to talk about your childhood. So you went into that a little bit on the podcast with Phil and them. But your mother inspired me. Now, I know that you said you were raised in an agnostic home.
That's right.
But at the same time, your mom instilled some great things in you.
I'm so glad you picked up on that.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
I have a quote here, and I hope you don't mind me saying
Sure.
it. In your book, your mom is quoted as to saying, "The most important asset you'll ever possess throughout your life is your character." Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit about that.
100%. You know, as a matter of fact, I will give as much time to this as necessary.
Let's go, brother.
And but unless she called, she's a little 84-year-old lady, probably 5'2". It's been a long time since she could whoop my butt, but she lives up on a mountain in Virginia, and she's doing well. But yes, she did teach me that. She taught me a lot about character, and as the business has grown and as we've expanded, and I have found that the older I get, that the people of character are the ones that you can always count on. They're the people. I tell people all the time, we're at a position now where we're opening stores, and we have people in different roles and some franchisees and operating partners. And I almost get insulted when people say, okay, when are we going to get the agreements drawn up? Because to me, if I've shaken your hand, at that point, we have a deal. We don't need the lawyers to mess it up, okay? Because they'll get involved and mess it up. I tell them what to put down, or in my mind, we've shaken hands. I'm going to do my end at that point, okay? And I expect you will do yours as well. But yeah, growing up in Eastern North Carolina, my folks were hardworking. We qualified for reduced lunches, but I remember this is another character thing. I remember my mother saying, "I brought you into this world. It's my job to feed you." And funny story, she wouldn't buy that good red string bologna, that was evenly cut. She bought that tube of bologna, and she never cut it just right. I always had that big, thick, fat end on one side and real skinny on the other. And it would remind you that you ate that bologna sandwich a couple hours later, because that big fat end would come back up in a burp. And but she would have that. That.
I'm with you. I've done it.
Maybe a little bag of chips or a baggie of chips. You didn't get your own individual.
No,
you got a baggie, and they threw some chips in there, maybe an apple, and that was your lunch. But she never took that. It was her job. And these things helped me make who I am. I mean, there's no question about it. She never quit. She provided. She worked hard. And yes, we didn't have a ton, but we always ate. Was it tough at some points? Yeah. I mean, I am not going to bore your audience with all those stories, but at the end of the day, there was love in the house. There was toughness in the house. And there was character, and I hopefully I've taken all three of those as I've become an adult myself and taught my children the same. And
by the way, we were able to meet Emma, Dylan, and Andy.
That's right.
And your other daughter,
Isabel.
We have not met her, and the wife, but we haven't been here long. But I mean, to meet them is awesome because they are spoken very highly of in the book, and. So you talked about, tell the story that you told about how you got your cross that you wore for years.
Oh, wow. Okay. Growing up, I grew up in an agnostic family. Okay. And even to this day, I think the second time I ever walked into a church, I got married in it. True story. That may be an exaggeration. I may have gone a time or two more, maybe went with another kid to vacation Bible school or whatever, but that just wasn't who my family was. And but even as a young child, I knew there was something there. And you're old enough to remember. The others that are sitting in this podcast room won't remember Dr. Robert Schuller.
Yes, the Golden Cathedral.
The Crystal Cathedral.
Crystal Cathedral.
I'll tell you what a fan I was. I remember as a little kid at 9 o'clock on Sunday morning, he would come on. And he had the most majestic voice. A lot better than you and I might add right now.
Absolutely.
And you could tell he was authentic.
Yes.
You could tell he wasn't a huckster up there trying to just get money. And so I was moved by him, and I would watch it. And I would even get teased by my family sometimes. Look at Kenny watching his church, And I might have been, I think I was 12 or 13 years old. And I just decided, because they had an address at the end of the show, I just decided, you know what? I'm going to write him a note. And so I did, and talked about how I enjoyed the program and all that. It was probably about 4 or 5 weeks later, a cross came in the mail. No pledge card, no, just a cross and a little note that said, may Christ be with you. And it was a cross that I wore until I was about 18 or 19 years old, and it's in the Atlantic Ocean somewhere right now. It came off of me, and I wore it for quite some time. So even though I knew the family, we didn't go to church, and because my mom had a couple of bad experiences with church, to be honest with you, and I think it kind of jaded her, although she's a spiritual woman. But I think the church itself kind of jaded her. And so even though I didn't grow up in it, I always knew there was something more there. Didn't know what, didn't know how to get my arms around it, but I knew there was something there. And God has definitely worked in my life through the years. There's no question.
And we're going to get into some of that through your book, because I mean, it's amazing. So you're a lot like me. One of the things that I appreciated about your mom, you guys, like you said, you qualified for reduced lunch. And your mom said, absolutely not.
Right.
No, we're not doing that.
Right.
There was pride.
And no offense to those that take it and need it. No. I'm not trying to say that. I'm just saying that was my mom.
Well, there was a lot of people back then that way.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll be honest with you. My dad used to say, because he grew up in southern Appalachia. And he would tell me, he said, John, we were all poor. But nobody knew it because everybody was poor.
Everybody was poor, right?
So nobody knew it.
That's right.
He said we had two sets of clothes. We had one that we wore to all week at school, and then we had one that we wore to church on Sunday.
Yeah.
He said that's how that works. But it's just there was some pride there, and that really struck me. Mm-hmm. That really helped. That really meant something to me.
I've never forgot it. And just like you've never forgotten that.
Exactly.
When you, I think it's amazing. When I talk to some of our operators in the stores or people that I may have some influence with or whatever, when I talk to them, I try to remind them all the time that whenever they feel like they've been dealt a bad hand, I'm like, no, your life's pretty good. I mean, you're doing okay. Think about the folks that are at the burn floor in the local hospital right now. Yeah. Now, they've got a bad day ahead of them. Is yours really that bad because you didn't get a like on Facebook on your latest post or something like that? I don't think that's really that big a deal. So.
Exactly.
And
you've got a roof over your head, a warm place to sleep, food.
That's right.
I mean, you have all your needs are met. Everything above that is a want.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
I had an offer to go to WVU and play football. Now, it wasn't from the school. It was from a coal company that my dad worked for. They were the largest money donors at the time to WVU, and they just wanted somebody to go up. So they had my dad come home and said, hey, tell John if he'll go up, he won't want for anything. Couldn't get in because of my grades. Mm-hmm. But I was twice the baseball player that I was football player. I just had a really bad coach my senior year. Mm. And so when I read your story, tell us what it was like working in the tobacco fields and playing sports at the same time.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's funny. It was just the opposite for me. I got a baseball scholarship to go play in college, but I loved football. I mean,
really?
I loved football. But I was 5'9", 170 pounds. I could run. I was pretty quick, and I had some walk-on opportunities and whatnot. But baseball was just something I did in the summer, but I came to love it due to a coach that I had. But yes, you're talking about a character builder. In August in 1980 and 1981, me and the quarterback on our high school football team, Mike Hunter, we were there are some other stories that I really don't want to share on here that Mike and I used to run around and do. And
we've all got a few of them, bro.
They're world class. I will tell you that. But Mike and I, we would literally get up. We had 2-a-days back then. You had 2-a-day football practices, 6 in the morning till 8 a.m.
We did 2-a-days
Right.
back whenever I was.
That's right, 6 to 8 a.m. and then 6 to 8 at night. And we would get up, drive to Morehead City from Newport, North Carolina, practice football in the morning, go work in the tobacco fields until 5 o'clock, go back for practice again that night from 6 to 8. Now, that's a full day, okay? When you're in August in the tobacco fields and you just had 2-a-days football, there was many a time I'd fall asleep in my supper at 9 o'clock at night. I mean, I was exhausted. So that was, but once again, I had a little money in my pocket, okay, and was able to buy my first little car, which was a sweet 1969 Opel Kadett, okay? Look at, there's blank looks all over the place. Like, as a matter of fact, that car was so funny. It was so funny. It was literally like if you got a little kid, I think the engineers at Opel said, look, I'm going to get my 10-year-old son to draw a car. And they did like a big box top and a big box front. That's exactly what the Opel Kadett looked like. And that was my first car that I bought with my tobacco field money. So that, and that's, it's all part of who you are, though. It's all part of, and now it's obviously it's not clothes or, I don't require a whole lot, but I still like a cool car. Okay, that's, and I think it goes back to that 69 Opel Kadett with the brake, the clutch pedal going out constantly and it burning. I kept oil in the trunk because you just had to, when you stopped, every time you stopped, you just kind of topped off the oil.
I've had a couple of them myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Didn't really impress the chick, so I will tell you that.
No, and
really
I've drove a few mosquito killers myself,
Yeah, exactly.
So in your book, it says, baseball took you to college and probably saved your life. How was that?
Well, the area that I grew up in was a coastal area, and I was running. I was an athlete, but I like to party. I like to have a good time. I like to stay out late. I like to do a lot of different things, and I was actually recruited by NC State to come play baseball there, and didn't have the grades to get in. I actually mentioned this on the Dave Ramsey Show, and we had
we listened to that.
Yeah, and we had a nice laugh about my horrible GPA, but I actually could not get into it, and I was an athlete and couldn't get in. That's how bad my grades were coming out of high school, and so I had to go the junior college route. And what saved my life was going to a smaller school in a smaller town, which is right here in Mount Olive. It's the University of Mount Olive now. It was Mount Olive College back then. I met my future wife. She had her stuff together, and so long story short, when I say it saved my life, that's probably a bit dramatic, but it definitely sent me on a different path.
Kenny, I understand. My wife is the only person that my dad's still alive today. My mom has passed, which I never lived with my mom, always my dad and my stepmom. She raised me. She was a kid raising kids.
Right.
There's less distance between me and her than her and my dad. But she did a great job. Mm-hmm. And
it's like my stepdad did too.
But my wife, my now wife, is the only person that has ever asked me at any time if I had homework.
If you had homework?
If I had homework. She was the only one. And I tell people that if it hadn't have been for her, I'd be behind bars. Mm. I would.
Yeah.
Because I'd have probably killed somebody on the road, drunk, drugging.
Definitely could have happened. No question.
So I understand. I hate to interrupt you. I'm
doubt
sorry.
about it. And, growing up, my brother, who is an attorney now, he was the really smart one in the family. And I was the really good athlete. And so I played that athlete card as hard as I could play it. I liked the recognition that you got from athletics, and that gave me a sense of self-worth. It was, it's kind of sad that I had to find my self-worth in that for me.
Right.
But that was a fact, and I just did not spend any time in my books. I didn't, and so, until I got to college. And then once I got to college, I grew up.
When you were in high school, you're a year older than me. I was born in 64. When I came through high school, grades didn't matter. You could play sports, and that's what happened to me.
That's right.
I just got through because I was an
But
athlete.
it did matter if you wanted to go to the next level, though.
Yeah, exactly.
It did matter.
So we both share that
That's
story.
right.
Hey,
That's
well,
right.
yeah, man, you're great.
That's right.
Sorry, dude. See you later. You got to go do something else.
That's right.
But yeah, that's awesome.
And thank goodness for the junior college and that coach there, coming down and saying, "Hey, love to have you. Here's a little bit. Here's some money. Come play baseball with us." And then that freshman year, I met my wife, and she was a year ahead of me, and I saw her get her associate's degree. And she hates when I tell this story. But I was sitting there when she graduated, and I went, wow, I'm as smart as she is. She hates when I tell it. But I'm just being honest here, okay? And so the next year, you remember you took 3-hour classes or whatever. I took 19 and 19 the next year. I took 38 hours the
and
next
you were
year.
playing sports.
And played baseball. And there was a neat lesson that came out of that. I took 38 hours. And I had one of my better years in baseball. I realized that I was better off when I had more on my plate. When I had a lot of free time on my hands, I wasn't very good. But when I had to either be studying, practicing baseball, or whatever. I was busy all the time. I was pretty good at all of the above.
Focus.
Yeah, locked in.
Yeah,
I locked in.
That's awesome. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what I gathered out of your book. Is exactly the way that you, and that's.
Even to this day, I'm better as a leader when we're in a storm than I am when it's smooth sailing. I mean, when it's smooth sailing, I guess I'm not challenged. I'm not sure what it is, but when times are stormy, there's a microbe floating around and they're shutting your stores down or the economy's going in the tank. I tend to be a much better leader then than when there's plenty of money in the bank and everybody's happy. So
I will tell you this. Chad and I both observed this. Chad worked at Medieval Times in Georgia, where they do
I've
he
been
was
to
a
those.
server.
yeah. Were you riding a horse?
I was learning for a little bit.
Okay, all right.
I never actually got to perform
You
on
never-
one or nothing like that.
No joust or anything like that?
No, I was in the sand. I was running weapons to guys, and I was
okay.
handing lances off, and they were in the off days. I was being taught how to swing a sword at people's faces, safely, and how to mount horses. But I was mostly taking care of the horses and making sure they were ready for the
Gotcha.
night.
Yes. So when we were sitting there today, and I told Chad earlier, I said, this is where Kenny brings, if he has guests or whatever, this is where they come to.
Mm-hmm.
I said, it wouldn't surprise me to see him here. Chad's the one that actually observed it and made a comment to one of the ladies there. When you walked in, it wasn't everybody tensing up. It got looser, brother.
I hope so. Great.
It was just like, but I'll tell you this: what was happening, and you were there. He was working. He saw it. It was the same before you got there as when you got there, and if anything, the mood got better when you
good.
walked in. One of your servers, the lady who was the girl that had on the bowling shirt,
Kennedy, I think.
paid
Yeah.
you a great comment. She said, he cares.
Oh, that's great.
And she said, he is unbelievable. He's a great leader. We all love him here. Nobody gets uptight when he walks through the door. He's encouraging. I wanted you to hear that because a lot of times
You
you
had
won't
one
hear that.
critique.
Oh, yeah, we got to share this for
What was
her.
the one critique?
There's no mac and cheese on the menu.
Well, you know what? I've actually thought about it. All right, just so you know, I have.
So Chad and I said, we're going to do that for you. We're going to mention the mac and cheese. And it's awesome.
But no,
too.
that's awfully kind of her, and it's it started back, and I always tell this story about how God's worked in my life and worked in our business, and I've told this story before, and I told it in the book, but I'd like to share it now. In 1991, when I started this, I remember people saying all along, and I read business books, and I was always trying to get a little better and a little edge here or there, and so when I got fired from my job and started Andy's in 1991 with $500 in my pocket, I remember thinking back on those books and thinking that if you just work hard and you're passionate about what you do, you'll be a success. I mean, that's what every single book said.
Yeah.
And so I was like, you know what? I can do that. I've got a great cheeseburger. I've got a great cheesesteak. I've got great food. I'm ready. So I found this closed restaurant in Goldsboro. Andy, my only son at the time, was about 18 months old. And just, I said, I found the guys that had the equipment, and I cut them a great deal. I said, look, if you'll in-house finance me that equipment in that closed restaurant, I will give you twice what a used equipment dealer will do it, plus interest. The catch is you can't give me I can't make my first payment until 45 days after I've been open. What do you say? And they said, okay. And that's kind of how I got my equipment. Now I had to get a lease. And so I started calling the mall, and because I had been fired from a job, I was unemployed, and I started calling the mall and saying, hey, look, I've got this great concept, I've got this great idea, I'm going to work hard. I was passionate about it, and he kept saying, yeah, but you don't have any money. You don't have anything that can go on the line in the event you don't pay. You don't have any collateral. You're just a guy. And so finally, I woke him up on a Sunday morning. Back then, if you dialed 411 and you knew where the guy lived, you could say, hey, phone number for this guy in this town, and they would give it to you. So I got it and woke him up. And he said, wow, you're persistent. He said, so I'm going to give you that lease. And it was a horrible lease. I had a little tiny space in the Goldsboro Mall. It was about 1,500 square feet. I think I had 16 bar stools and 4 tables. And my rent in 1991 was $3,300 a month.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, back then, my Andy's cheeseburger special that we now sell for $8.59, and that's still keeping the pricing as best I can, back then was like $3.65. So I had to make that big rent out of those kind of specials. But that's how I got started. So work hard, cooked every burger for the first year, open to close, every single one. Into the second year as well, open to close. Passionate. Man, if you'd have said, hey, Kenny, what's going on, man? I'd have given you 30 minutes of Andy's. Okay, I was going to vomit out everything about what I was doing and how excited. I mean, I was passionate. End of year 1, I actually found 3 more closed restaurants, did similar kind of deals because in my crazy brain, I thought, if I have more than one, then I'll start to get more name recognition, which will enhance each one. That was my theory. Well, at the end of year 1, 3 of them were failing, and the one I was running was making a little bit of money. And I was $35,000 behind on my food bills. And passionate, absolutely. Work hard, couldn't work any more hours. The mall wasn't open, couldn't do any more. So I was riding home one night, and I was riding down Highway 111. I had about a 30-minute ride to get home, and I finally kind of hit a wall. I was like, you know what? I'm tired. I go in every day, hopefully bring energy when I walk in the door, and everybody has a great positive energy. Hopefully I'm doing that. But man, I'm tired because I'm alone in the car now. I am just beat, and my feet hurt, and I missed a family reunion, and I'm missing my son. I see him for 30 minutes, an hour in the morning, but by the time I get home at night, he's in bed. I'm missing seeing him grow up. My wife, who is phenomenal, incredibly supportive, is also starting to get a little tired, I think, at this point. And I'm riding down the road, and I'm having this conversation, and that voice popped in my head and said, hey, man, it's not about you. So I start to argue a little bit. What do you mean it's not about me? Of course it's about me. It's my feet. It's my kid. No. What have you done for others? How have you helped them? And it was God's voice. Wait, this is me. How are you helping that guy who's working so hard in Greenville, North Carolina? Exactly. What are you doing for him? What are you doing for the guy in Washington, North Carolina? What are you doing for them? This is all about you. It's not about you. So thought about that thing that night, got up the next day and said, you know what? I'm going to change the direction of this company. I'm going to focus all my energy on helping them to become successful owners of their stores that they're working in right now. Within 6 months, we were in the black. We had made up that $35,000 in food bills, and we were on our way. Now, we've had some starts and stops along the way, but most of the time, the starts and stops are because I've lost my way. The company has always kind of rolled along. The company's always been good. It's when I've lost my way,
right.
And or maybe I've gotten a little prideful, or I've gotten a little arrogant, or whatever the case may be. So, but that was a huge moment, and it was the first time that God worked through me and then blessed me on the other side of it. And there's been multiple other small things, but that was a biggie. That was a biggie. So,
Well, I told her, I said, he hasn't forgotten where he came from.
no.
Kenny, that means a lot.
Well,
A lot of people forget that.
but whenever I do, things tend to go south too.
But
Do you know what I mean? And that's human
Exactly.
nature, because we start to believe our little press clippings after a while. We start to think, you know what, I'm a pretty good guy. And whenever that pride creeps in, that's when I've wandered off the path.
And
so I
that's-
try to get back to it again.
Love your neighbor.
Love your neighbor.
And it shows in your business.
Well-
and I wanted to share that with you because it's just like anything else. Everybody's quick to criticize or to complain. There's a reason why in the Navy there's an old saying that says it takes 10 attaboys to undo one woe is me.
That's right.
And I wanted you to hear what your people are saying.
Well, I appreciate that, because you're right. And in my office, I tend to hear the negative more than I hear that.
Exactly.
So it is good to kind of get that reassurance that we are making a connection to not only our guests, but more importantly to the people that work with us every day. And so that's good to hear.
So if you would, so I skip forward just a little bit. There's a lot about your baseball.
Well, I tell
years
long
and
stories
stuff.
too, so you might only get through about 4 questions.
No,
here,
you're
too,
good. One of the things that Chad and I went over these. I did these last night. I kind of went through your book, and there was so much in there. I'm like, my God, I'll keep him there for 12 days. So I had to kind of pick and choose, and
Right.
kind of what I wanted to do is bring certain things up, and then let you take it wherever you wanted
Sure.
to. One of the things that Chad mentioned was, or that I had on here, was about ask you to tell us about the different jobs you had leading up to, and what happened, or how it all come about for you losing your job with $500 in your pocket, and then starting back where the story you just told about how you went into that.
Sure.
And what you learned from those jobs and how they helped you when you started Andy's.
Oh, it's almost like when I reflect back now, because I graduated college in 1985. So what are we talking about now? That's 36 years ago or something like that. Yeah, I believe that's about right. Golly, I'm getting old. But 36 years ago. Yeah.
Come on now, brother. Don't make me
No,
feel too
I mean,
old now.
it's getting there, bud. We are getting there. But anyway, that's 36 years ago. And look, it was almost like each job led me, it was a benefit in one form or another. My first job out of college was working for a big cigarette company selling cigarettes.
I remember that.
I literally, I drove a station wagon that looked like the family truckster from the vacation movies, and it was full of cigarettes in the back. And I would go into stores and trade out old cigarettes, put fresh in, sell displays to independents and stuff like that, and put up displays that had been negotiated. And what I learned through that was two things, okay? One, I remember going into one particular grocery store. I'm not going to say which one it was, but one particular grocery store. And I couldn't do anything in there except, quote unquote, work their rack, which means take out the old cigarettes, make sure they're fresh, make sure the dates are right so that the oldest that are still fresh are sold first and all of that. But I remember they had a manager in that store that just talked to me like the lowest piece of dog whatever on the bottom of his shoe every single time I walked in there. I mean, it was crazy. And I thought he was joking at first, so I thought we were going to go back and forth. No, he just liked his position of power and the ability to kind of control another human being that couldn't do anything about it. All right. And well, the story gets funny, a little bit funny anyway. So I go in one time and I've got this display, and I've got a piece of paper that's a mimeographed. I mean, this was 1986, I think. It's mimeographed, and it's in that grocery store's letterhead, and it says, I have the right to put up this display at this position in the store. And he grabs that from me and shows it to his assistant and goes, does this look real? Now, keep in mind, and the young fellows that are in here with us right now, I couldn't go on Google and find their letterhead and print off of. I mean, I would have had to have literally, it would have had to have been like a, some kind of James Bond thing to get all that, to even get it on a piece of paper to try to fake him out.
Or hope you had a dime, not a quarter, but a dime to put in a payphone.
Yeah, I'm getting to the payphone. All right, I promise you that. I'm getting. That's actually part of this story. All right. So anyway, so he was like, "This doesn't look real. This looks fake." And I'm like, "Come on, man. I mean, why would I? What?" He goes, "I don't know if I'm gonna let you do." And I finally said, back then, I think I mentioned it on the Unashamed podcast that I used to be until Phil dunked me in that river 2 years ago. I was a world-class cusser. Okay, I mean, I was not
it's
just.
in the book.
I was not just. Yeah, all those fuzzes in the book. Okay, I was not just. I was world class. Okay, and so I asked him, what's your problem? And he said, "What'd you say to me?" And long story short, he threw me out of the store. So I went to a payphone, put the money in, called my boss, and said, "Hey, look, I'm still sitting in the parking lot, and if this is going to cost me my job, I'm going to walk back inside and whoop that guy's tail before I leave here because he needs his tail whooped, okay, by somebody." He was like, "No, can I get in your car and leave?" And so I did, all right? But I learned how to treat people from that. So if I ever hear of a franchisee getting on our Pepsi guy or our bread guy or our food distributor, it just hits a spot with me like you wouldn't believe. And I also learned, because my boss was very old school hardcore. I mean, this sucks, that sucks. I remember right before I left, he was evaluating me, and I'd been with him over 2 years, and I had never risen above a C employee. You had A, B, C, D. I was a C after 2 years, and and so he started evaluating me, and he started going, "Hey, this is bad, 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 bad." And finally, I knew I was leaving, so I said, "Hey, bud, will you do me a favor?" He said, "What's that?" And I said, "Did you see one good thing today?" He went, "Well, yeah." I went, "What was it?" And he told me. I went, "Thanks. Go ahead, continue." And so I also learned that, yes, there are times that you have to sit somebody down and you have to have a tough conversation with them. But you always, you have to be soft on the person and hard on their behavior. It's the behavior we don't want to change. I shouldn't have hired the person. If you know what I mean, I'm not even going to try to, and I'm certainly never going to demean another man or woman. I don't intend to do that. Have there been times I've lost my temper? Yes, and I've messed that up. Okay, but for the most part, my heart's in the right place, and so I learned that from that job, and then that was the cigarette salesman job, and also I learned at that point too that I really never ever wanted to. I wanted to control my own fate somewhat, but I wasn't ready to take the leap. I was still young. And so I went to work for another individual, and it was basically doing my own thing, if you will. It was A.L. Williams is what it was called. It was a multi-level marketing company. And what I learned from that was the ability to stand in front of a group and do a speech. Well, now I
remember this.
Now I get in front of big groups and I do commencement addresses or I do speeches now, and I may get a pang of butterflies, but I'm very comfortable doing that. That came from that training. Guess what? Karen and I ate egg sandwiches while I was doing that because I wasn't making any money, but I learned how to speak. So everything kind of had a little piece to getting me to where I was ready to run my own business. I was ready to lead people, and it wasn't until, like I said, 1992 when I had that conversation with God that I also learned what it was to kind of take that extra step once I started listening to Him too. So
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you lose your job and they take your car, and you have to call your wife to come and get you.
That's right.
And you had bought a house. You have a young son at home.
That's right.
And you decide, you know what? I can do this restaurant thing.
That's what I was doing for them. Yeah.
And you did it. And here's what.
Yeah.
So
I still see Andy. Andy's 6'1" now, and I still see that little baby with his pipe in his mouth, his little passy in his mouth, in the car seat at about 9 o'clock at night, coming to pick me up that night. Unemployed, knowing I'm responsible for this. I still see it. Yeah.
So you're on your hands and your knees in a mall, scrubbing the nastiest greasiest.
Yep.
I got a kick out of this. So the K&W guy walks over, says, "Hey, what are you using?"
Yeah.
Hey, what was it that he gave you to cut that grease? And you all were like, "This is amazing."
It was oven cleaner, but it was industrial oven cleaner. And, oh, yeah. Look, he just reached out to me.
Really?
Yeah, about a month ago.
That is
I had
awesome.
not thought about it. Well, I had thought about him, but I hadn't, heard from him in years and years and years. But that guy, well, I mean, what a class act. He came over there, and I was not going to hurt the K&W cafeteria. They had their audience,
Right.
But he certainly didn't have to lend a hand to me either. And he walked over there and goes, "What are you using?" I went, "A little bit of Dawn and Clorox." And he went, "I'll be right back." And he went there and he brought me this big jug. Probably hurt him on his food cost that month. Might have even hurt his bonus a little bit. But he brought me a big jug of that, and man, that was savior juice, is what that was. You put that on, and it just took off everything. Because that store, they had closed that restaurant in the middle of a shift, and then, I mean, the mall kicked them out. They closed the restaurant. So for a long time, there was still food in there that spoiled.
Oh, my gosh.
So look, all that got out, and it was covered in bugs and nastiness. So, and it was just Karen and I in there scrubbing it, ready to go chase the American dream. Let's go chase the American dream. But it looks like we're on our way, baby. Okay. I told you I'd take you somewhere. You didn't know it was going to be on your knees scrubbing up bugs and everything else in a little tiny spot in the Goldsboro Mall. But hey,
I have a wonderful wife.
Here we are, right?
But she'd be looking at me, checking here now, saying, "Are you kidding me right now?"
Well, there were times she went, "Oh, I think I got to go change the baby." Okay, there were times that she did that and got away. True story, when things got exceptionally ugly. But no, it was great. I mean, it really was.
So tell us a little bit about how you assembled your team. And Chad and I are big John Maxwell fans. Mm-hmm. One of his favorite quotes that I always use is, "If you think you're leading, look behind you. If nobody's following, you're just taking a walk."
That's right.
And so when I see, again, when I see you walk in there today, and I see what's happening, when you walked in, brother, everybody got behind you. So you are leading. Tell us what it was like assembling the team over the years. I know that there's been some struggles, and if you don't care, when you kind of go into this, there was one individual, we don't have to name a name, I think y'all called him Mr. Johnson or something in the book, that kind of led things into where you wanted to do the right thing by your bank, and the bank ended up wanting to chop your head off, basically.
Right. That's
If
right.
you would tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, that individual, what I have found through the years, and I had a lot of fault in the relationship that I had with him. But when you talk about assembling my team, the team that I've put together through the years have all pretty much grown up with me. You know, I was blessed to get a guy named Dan Jones very early on, who brought me Neil Dennis, who brought me his wife April Dennis. You know, it was, and they're all.
And they're
amazing.
still here today.
Well, Dan left for a while, but believe it or not, he's back now. He was gone during the book, but he's back now. So it's,
Really?
yeah, he's back now. And he was my original right-hand man. And Neil and April have moved out in the western part of the state to help us develop that area. But it's been a godsend. I have not gotten any one of them through Indeed or an ad anywhere. They've kind of just come up through the ranks, and a lot of my top franchisees were former minimum wage employees that we got started, and now they're wonderful operators. And so when you look at the building of my team and all of that, that's been incredible. Have I had some franchisees through the years that have let me down? Yeah, oh yeah, it happened last week. I mean, it's going to happen, and a lot of times it'd be real easy to sit back and go, "Gosh, after I've done all this for them," and then kind of have a little pity party for yourself. Can't believe they do that to me, but I have found out that, you know what, I did it because I wanted to do it. I did it because in my heart it felt like the right thing to do. And if they dump all over it, it is what it is. The karma or whatever will probably bite them in the tail somewhere down the road, but I'm going to keep moving forward. The deal with my bank was around 2010 to 2012, the economy kind of really went south on us. And I had a lot of franchisees out there that were struggling, okay? Some of them literally took the key, set it on the counter, or locked the door, put it above the door, and walked out. And this goes back to a character thing. The bank that did a lot of their financing, was it was with them. You know, they financed their stores, and I stepped in and started paying their note payments. I stepped back into the store, got it operating, and started paying their note payments. This came to be about 30 stores that this happened in.
I didn't know it was that
It was
many.
huge. It was huge. So it's not a little office, but our office went from comfortably running 10 to 15 corporate stores and the rest being a franchisor organization. Well, all of a sudden now we were a 40-store corporate store chain. And I was paying other people's note payments. And so I was paying about $136,000 a month in note payments that didn't belong to me. They were other bad franchisees' note payments. So I kept calling the bank and begging them, hey, please come here. I need you to refinance this. I need you to refinance this. Well, finally, I ran out of money. Frankly, I just ran out of money. All my savings was gone. And I'm begging them every month, man, I'm drowning here. I need you to come in here and just cut this payment in half. Cut it in half and we will survive and I will make you whole. Because once again, don't forget, these were not my notes. The vast majority of these were not mine. So finally, when I ran out of money, I told my assistant at the time, Jacqueline, I said, Jacqueline, anything that has Kenney Moore's name on it or the Little Mint, which is my company, pay it. Anything that has anybody else's name on it, don't pay it. Well, then, of course, they called me immediately. Hey, man, what's going on? I was like, guys, I told you I've been drowning here. And I was a little angry. I was angry. I've been drowning here. I needed you to come in here and help, and help me out with it. Well, yeah, we can do that. And long story short, and it's mentioned in the book, I don't want to drag this out too far, but they put me in the troubled asset group. Me, a guy that's never missed a payment to them, a guy that I brought out a stack of loan papers one time and said, look at all, this is the stuff I've borrowed from you through the years. Every bit of it's been paid in full. Most of it was paid off early. This is and you're putting me. So I started dealing with bankers from D.C. I wasn't even dealing with my local guy anymore. And because I was a troubled asset, and so I got a little attitude about that, and I'll never forget. It was right here in this office. The last time I met with him, we were trying to get it reset again, and this guy walked in and said, "Hey, I hear," and I never met him. He goes, "Hey, I hear you're kind of tough." Well, I'm from New York, and I'm tough too. First thing out of his mouth. So he kind of set the stage there, And look, I mean, if you read my book, I mean,
I've a couple times.
Look, I'm a Christian guy. I'm a good guy, but that doesn't mean I'm not a warrior either. Okay, so don't mistake my kindness for weakness. Okay, because I'm not weak. And so, long story short, they sat down and I looked at them. I said, "Hey guys, you know what? You've never told me." They're like, "What's that?" It's like, "You never told me thank you. Thank you for taking on all that debt that wasn't yours, because you're a person of character and you didn't want your company to be linked with something bad. So you're paying other people. You never said thank you." And that's when one of them said, "Well, you had culpability because you sold him the store." I said, "Man, what are you talking about? So if I sell this guy over here in my house and you finance it and he doesn't pay the mortgage, I'm culpable?" I said, "Is that how this is supposed to work?" So long story short, I asked him to leave.
Yes, you did.
I asked them to leave in no uncertain terms. And they called the note that day at 5 o'clock. They called the $5 million note payment on me. And then the next couple months was a really, really stressful time. But God stepped in even then, too. Our sales were climbing. Our sales were moving back up. Now, physically, it was the weirdest thing. I was so stressed about this. And it wasn't the voice that kept reminding me, it wasn't about me. Because part of me was like, you know what? Fine. I'm done. I'll go do something else. I'll go start something else. I'll take these key people. I'm out of here. The other side of me went, no, there's a whole lot of people that eat out of these restaurants. And not the guests. I'm talking about the people that work with me. And I can't do that to them. And I was so stressed that the backs of underneath my arms and my calves were literally open sores. And I would go to the doctor. He had no idea what it was. No idea at all. And so as soon as Fifth Third Bank and a man named Martin Green stepped in, and Ian, Martin and Ian stepped in and made it happen through the SBA so that I could get that loan, get that other bank out of there. And I had a fresh start with them. As soon as that happened, within 2 weeks, all those stores went away, and I've never had them since.
And here's what here's what I want people to understand about this. Not only was the bank calling the note, not only were you trying to find a way to do your, you're trying. Well, okay, so Fifth Third, but even before Fifth Third come on, you're out there trying to find another bank.
Oh,
and you've got a timeline on you.
I went through 12 of them, absolutely.
I mean, they've set a do or die date on.
They had set a do or die date, and look, I went through these 12 banks, and I had to act like everything was great.
Yeah. You had to put on a good face.
I didn't want to act like I was desperate. That was the last thing they needed to see, and I was kind of desperate. And but yeah, every one of those other banks were like, "We're in on this. We love this," and then they'd come back within 48 hours. No, click. No, click. And so yeah, it was. We were running up on the deadline, and I remember calling Martin one time on Saturday, and I could hear his kids playing in the background. I went, "Martin, how do you give me a percentage that you feel that this is going to happen?"
That's amazing you just said that, because I was thinking about that, because I was going to ask you about when did you make that phone call?
It was late in the game. I can't remember the exact date, but it was getting close, and that's why I think he came back and said 95 or 98%, and I was like, or 90 it may have been, but it was enough to make me sleep that weekend. And but it was getting up. I think it may have been even the next week when kind of the D-Day hit, and I do remember they came and. The other bank, they took my stock, and
That's another thing I was going to. I told Chad about.
They did some things to try to take jabs at me, right down the stretch, and because they knew that would hurt me. It was totally it was a non issue to begin with. Taking my stock was just a play. It didn't mean anything, but they knew it would get me, so they took a jab at me.
So, and here's what I want our listeners to understand. He was waiting for a bank. Fifth Third finally came through, but Fifth Third couldn't give you the final paperwork until the SBA came through.
That's
and the
correct.
government doesn't do anything
They don't
fast.
do anything fast.
On top of that, you're having to deal with the federal trade mark.
That's right.
Because you're having to change from Andes because you couldn't take Andes outside of the
state of North Carolina
because of the little custard dude.
That's right. Who's now coming into North Carolina, I might add. I see him popping up now too.
So you've got, and then on top of that, your business, your master franchisees, is what you call them.
That's right.
Is exploding. Mm-hmm. The guys from Abu Dhabi, is that how you say it?
Abu Dhabi.
Abu
yeah.
Dhabi. That's about the same time that they came on board.
That's
wasn't
right.
it?
That's right. So there were some godsends in there too, and a man named Rex Stevens came on and bought the rights to develop Texas and part of Oklahoma. And
he was excited.
Rex was a beautiful man. I say was because he's gone now.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's a horrible story. I don't know what happened. I tried to help him. He was going to put a group together. Man had done really, really well in his life, and he bought the rights to Oklahoma and Texas. And he actually infused some cash into our company by buying those rights. That was very timely at the time. And he ended up before the first store opened up, he committed suicide.
Oh man,
it was absolutely crazy. And I remember he was slipping. He kind of wanted out, and I was like, Rex, I've spent your money. I can't, but here's what I can do. We'll build your territory out for you, and we'll keep the same deal. I literally wanted to send people to Texas, let them do it for him. Okay. And he was like, no, I got to get out. And then he literally committed suicide shortly thereafter. And you know what's incredibly sad about this is that I remember looking at him going, if I can grow up to be the Southern gentleman that he is, because he was an older man. If I am that kind of granddad, then it would have been a life well lived. And so it still breaks my heart talking about it right now. He was a terrific man. So, but yeah, we had master franchisees coming on over. We were in the Middle East. We were expanding through Texas. Montana had stepped in at that point. So we had a lot going on. So there was a ton of good happening, at the same time that I had to keep that. You have to, as a leader, sometimes you have to keep that smile and we got this. Even when you know over here that you might be down to your last shekel this week, or I got to get through payroll Friday, and you're worried about it. So, and those, even 20-something years old, you still have those concerns from time to time.
This podcast is called Fortitude for a reason. It is to tell stories like yours because you didn't give up. You could have. You could have just folded everything, packed your family up, and went and started, just like you said in your book. Look, I'll throw all your stuff out. Mm-hmm. I'll throw all the equipment out. I'll bring in new equipment, and I'll restart.
That's right.
You could have done that. But I go back to a little lady.
No, character. You got it.
I mean, man, I'm telling you right now, man, it brings emotion in me because my dad could have quit. Mm-hmm. When my mom and dad left, when my mom and dad split, my sister went with my mom. I stayed with my dad. My sister bounced back and forth. He worked 14, 16 hours a day, 6, 7 days a week. We didn't have anything. Dad was having to pay off bills that Mom had ran up, that it was left to him to have to deal with. That we lived in. Dad calls them hell holes. Rat holes, the trailers that we lived in. But we didn't give up, and it was a step by step, and that tenacity that Dad showed. So when I hear about what you went through, I think back to your mom and what she instilled in you. And just like my boys love my dad, they think, buddy, that he walks above water. And I hope that your kids can feel the same way about your mom and what she, what she instilled in you, because your legacy now is not just with your family. It's every one of these stores you got out here. Even though somebody may be the franchise owner of it.
Right.
It's culture.
That's right.
And you've developed that. I'm so proud of you, man.
Well, I appreciate it. I
You,
appreciate it. It's a little... Yeah, I have been absolutely 100% blessed. I have had people that buy into love your neighbor. They buy into that culture. There are people of character, and as long as we still have that around us, we're going to be all right. We'll make mistakes, and we'll try things that won't work, and and things will get tight, and but hey, you know what? We'll keep moving forward because the mission is more than just making money. Do we need to make money? Yes. My biggest fear is, and we close our stores down once a year and we have a rally. We invite all of our kids we close the stores and say, come here, we're going to celebrate you. And my biggest fear is that tenacity that your dad had, that tenacity, that fortitude, that, I'm going to provide. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to get out of this hole that I'm in. I fear that I don't see that fire in a lot of eyes all the time anymore. I see it more of that's an expectation that I'm supposed to get something, just because
I deserve this.
I'm here, and so I do hope we move away from that as a country and we get back to people believing that they can achieve whatever they believe and they put their hearts to, that old saying, whatever the mind can conceive and believe you can achieve. I'm a firm believer in that. And yes, guess what? And it's going to be bumpy, and that's okay, because all that does is build that character. So
we all know now you came out of this. Mm-hmm. Everything came through.
And now we're jumping off doing something totally different. But yes.
So you're in the conference room with your people. You pull all your people in the office, if I understand right in your book. So you pull everybody in. While you're in there, you've got champagne or wine or something you all are celebrating. I mean, you should have been celebrating. That's right. Ruth Crisp or something. I mean, it was.
Yeah, we should have done better than we did anyway. You're right.
So you get a phone call from your lawyer.
That's right. Adam Bowden.
What did he tell you?
He told me, I got your stock in the car, Kenny.
What happened to you?
What's that? Oh, I broke down. I mean, I absolutely, And and when I finally lifted my head up, everybody in the room was in the same, the same position. Everybody had tears streaming down their face because this is ours. It's actually, this is ours and this is God's. We run it for Him, but we are family in here, and so we celebrate victories together, we celebrate losses together, and we love each other, and we're not afraid to say that. When we leave, when we're not around each other or whatever, we haven't seen each other in a while. Hey, I love you, buddy. We're not ashamed of that. So yeah, when I broke down, because I can be a tough guy at times, and when I broke down, they all kind of disintegrated with me. So, and April called Karen, and she raced over here from my house to make sure she could be here to put her arm around me too. But it was a celebration as much as anything.
I do want to take just a second. If you all will take a quick break, but if you all want to go use the bathroom or something, we can.
I'm good.
Because I'd like to take just a little bit here and talk about COVID and how COVID affected your business. And I'd like to talk about we kind of share a timeline when you went to Louisiana, but I kind of like to talk about that.
Okay.
Because anybody that hasn't seen that podcast, they really should. They go for an hour. So Kenny was loaded, and you did a great job, man. I'm so thankful you were there. But I'd like to talk about how that's changed you. What caused you to pick up that phone? I want to get spiritual here a little bit. Talk on the evangelical side. We had a little bit of that conversation before we got started. Because no matter if it's fortitude or the shelter hole, I want God to be glorified and Him to get all the glory.
That's right.
Because as we look back over what happened to you and what you went through, God, you can see God's hand in that. I can. I'm sure you can too.
No question.
And there was a point in your book where you, as a matter of fact, if you don't mind, I want to read a quote out of your book.
Sure.
This came from one of the ladies. I think she still works here today. From Amy. It says, the most ironic thing about Amy's first impression of Kenny, that he was some godless sinner, for all of his cussing and swearing and anger, isn't even that he was so generous and charitable. It was that she, along with most other people in Kenny's life, had no idea that all along, as part of his lifelong search for peace, had been trying to find God. And with all the same passion he put into everything else. And that really caught me. She still works here today.
Oh, yeah.
She has a great story with you, too. That's probably one we need to know.
She has advanced in the company, too. She's one of my key people now.
And played a huge part in one of your master franchisees wasn't she working at one of your stores when they came in and was asking how they,
Yep.
And that's
how she found out about the job, yeah.
Yeah, and it's all in the book. If everybody, I don't want to tell them everything in the book. I want them to go buy your book. So if you would kind of just pick up, with COVID and because you went down to Louisiana, you were on your way down there when the government shut everything down.
Well, it's close, yeah.
It was pretty close.
Very close, yeah. I was, I'd actually started, that was around March of 2020. The previous year, around October, a good dear friend of mine named Billy Godwin got married for his second time or third time. But anyway, he and his wife got married. He asked me to do the ceremony.
Yeah, that's a great story.
And so I'm like, Billy, I really believe we can find somebody a little more qualified than me. I really do. He was like, no, I really want you to do it. So I actually went online and got ordained. But I was already in the process of saying, you know what, Kenny, it's really time. It's really time to go all in on Jesus. It's time. But I wasn't ready to pull the trigger. I still cussed too much. Well, never been a huge drinker. It wasn't that, but I was, But anyway, so that was October of 2019. So I continued to kind of mentally work on myself. And then February of 2020, Billy's a baseball coach. And he's a couple years younger than me. And he was down in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And his team was opening up. It was an opening weekend with Coastal Carolina, San Diego State, his team, UNC Greensboro, and Virginia Tech. They had already played their first game. And the next day, he woke up in the hotel, got upset. He didn't feel right. And I said, maybe I need a shower and I'll feel better. Took a shower, walked back out, got on the balcony of the hotel, and long story short, walked back in and had a stroke. And I didn't even go to Myrtle Beach. I was planning to see him for his home opener the next week. Well, the prior year, he was actually a scout. He had just gotten back into coaching. He was a scout for the New York Yankees. So there's a blessing in that. So long story short, one of my other buddies texted me, said, hey, looks like Billy's had a stroke. I'm like, what? This is an alpha male. He's a wide open guy. The last guy you would expect. The one that used to run a little extra at practice when none of us did. You just wouldn't have expected him. And so anyway, I looked at Karen. I said, hey, honey, I'm going to Myrtle Beach. I told her what happened. I said, I'm going to leave in about 30 minutes. And if you'd like to come along, please hop in the car. And so, of course, I gave her 45 because I knew she'd never be ready in 30. I gave her 45. And I fed her on the way down, which I wouldn't even have stopped to eat. But I'm glad I had her with me. Because as I'm riding down there, I'm thinking, if he was still a scout for the Yankees, he would have been in a hotel somewhere.
Wow.
And he would have been alone. He wouldn't have had his assistant coaches around, wouldn't have had his wife around, he'd have been alone. And had he laid down on that bed, and he might not have been able to get up, and he might not even have been found until they came in there to clean his room. So that's blessing number one. So all this is running through my head, right? Running through my head. And plus, he and I are very close. And then Karen's pulling up the hospital and goes, oh, Kenny, you're never going to believe this. He's at North Myrtle Beach Medical Center. The tagline is, we specialize in strokes.
Wow.
So not only is he in the right place with the right people around him, but he's going to a facility that specializes in exactly what just happened to him. And it was found early enough that he could get that shot. If it's a couple hours after a stroke, if you don't get that shot, you may not be able to reverse it. So he'd gotten the shot. So that really started to send me over the edge. I really was listening to God at this point. But I was very emotional, so I got back. That was a Sunday, and I walked in my office, and I had started watching Unashamed. I had actually started watching a repeat of Duck Dynasty right before I'd go home, because I would have a tough day, and I'd be like, that prayer and voiceover at the end just made my spirit feel good. So I'd walk in the house with a smile on my face. Hey, Dylan, what's going on, buddy? And I'd feel good. Well, when you watch that, Unashamed popped up underneath it. I was like, wonder what this is. So I started watching the podcast, and just something told me. And Al had mentioned his email address. And so I went, wonder why he did that. That's crazy. And I write him this email. And I'm like, hey, I was baptized in my 30s, but I more did it for my wife because I wasn't raised in the church, blah, blah, blah. And I'd like to do it again, and I want a Robertson to do it because you guys are authentic. And I was like, he won't write me back. Within 24 hours, I got a longer email back. And he said, come on. So we set it up. This was in February. We set it up. He goes, I'm going to be in town every Sunday. Come on a Sunday. And then once again, I look at this, I get goosebumps thinking about this. So I look at the calendar. My physical birthday is March 15th. That fell on a Sunday. So I went, how does March 15th sound? He went, perfect. Come on. So he and I were doing this through email. We didn't have each other's phone numbers at the time. So that I start to take off that Friday before the Sunday. I try to get my youngest son and daughter in the car. They don't really want to go, okay? Karen, they're hemming and hawing. I was like, look, I kind of feel like this is my thing anyway. You guys stay, I'm gone. So I took off. About 10 o'clock that night, I remember we had called the church that morning, and the church said, yeah, we plan to be open on Sunday. So great. And then I'm listening to the news, and it's like everything's shutting down everywhere as I'm driving, literally. And I'm like, they're not going to be. So I go to my email. I'm driving. I'm near Birmingham, Alabama. I go to my email. I'm doing what I shouldn't be doing. I'm looking at it while I'm driving at about 80. And the first one is Al Robertson. I'm like, oh, no. And it was a phone number. So I called him. Lisa answered, put Al on the phone. He goes, you still coming? I said, man, I'm in Birmingham. He said, well, come on. He said, come on down. He said, when you get here, I said, I'm stopping in Mississippi and I'll see. He goes, when you get here, go do the Duck Commander tour. He said, then come over to my house for dinner. And I said, okay. So I went over to his house. They invited me to their house, never met me. Went over there. Uncle Si walked out of the living room and hey, man, what's going on? With his blue teacup in his hand. I'm like, the world is ending. The microbe is taking over everything. I was like, this is surreal.
Officially stepped into the Matrix.
Oh, it was crazy. and so the next, so we have a great dinner that night. His son-in-law cooked for us and did a wonderful job. And Jay, and then went over to Al's house and sat down with him and Lisa, and we talked about God a little bit. And they gave me a couple of their books because I'd already given Al mine. So next day we go to the church. They do their first video stream of church, but there's still 20 or 30 people sitting in there. So I sit in there and watch that, and then he walked over me and goes, Dad's waiting on you at the river, or because it was March 15th, it was cold. He goes, or we can do it right here. I'll do it for you right here. I said, let's go to the river. He goes, I thought you'd say that. So we hopped in the truck and took off and sat down in the house, and Phil shared a little bit of the word with me and said, come on, let's go. And we went out in the river and he baptized me. Now, here's the beautiful ending of the story. I was on fire. I still am, but I was on fire. Drove from West Monroe, Louisiana, straight home. I stopped to go to the bathroom a couple times and eat some beef jerky, but I was on a mission. Got home March 17th, 2 days later, the governor shut all our stores down. And we were in a lot of strip centers. And he said, no more dine-in. So it was like, oh my, this is not good. But I had a peace about me. I had a calm about me. And it came from getting in that muddy river in West Monroe, Louisiana. So I was calm, and I would do videos out to the field to say, we got this, we'll figure it out. And so the end of March was ugly. April was kind of ugly. May, we were down, our month of May was down a little bit from 2019. June through last month, we've had same-store sales increases. Every month we've gone up. And that's a God thing. I mean, there's no question about it. I'm all in on that now. I put words on the side of the building that are a little bit of the fruit of the Spirit. We preach love your neighbor. Like I've said before, the most hardcore people, agnostics, atheists, God-hating folk, whatever, normal people that don't have a say one way or the other, nobody can argue with love your neighbor. If you say that's a bad concept, you got bigger issues. You got a problem. So we try to teach our young people to spread that message, to serve others, to meet their needs before your own get met, to understand that's how we should be living our lives. We should be meeting their needs, not for tips, because we don't know. When they come in that door, they got a story. They may have been sitting with a loved one who's dying of cancer. And this is the old 1 hour that old Uncle Charlie comes in and says, hey, look, I can tag up with you right now for an hour or so. And they choose to come meet with us. Shouldn't we say hi to them? Shouldn't we refill a cup? Shouldn't we love on them? Yeah. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about love your neighbor. And hopefully it'll spread, because it's a divisive world that we live in right now. So we're just going to try to share a good hot meal with a smiling face and the right spirit about us. Well, hopefully we'll put in front of every guest that comes in there.
Exactly. Two more things I want to ask you about. One is your foundation, but we'll do that last.
Okay.
There's one other story I want to ask you about in your book. It's about a young man that had a powerful impact on you. You had stepped out to have a cigarette one day. You took about 3 drags off of it, and you looked at the gentleman who was out there with you and said, what would he give to have my body?
That's right.
One day. Would he waste it with a cigarette? And you threw it down, and that was it for you.
That was it. That was 21 years ago.
Tell us a little bit about that.
That was 21 years ago. And it was actually this young man when we first started out with our foundation. So we kind of tie both questions together.
Okay, well, that's great.
Yeah,
That's
it really
awesome.
does, because that's where I met him. When we first started that, we only gave our proceeds to Make-A-Wish Foundation. We've expanded that now, and 2 years ago we gave to 50-something different organizations. But we did a golf tournament in New Bern, North Carolina, and it was just Make-A-Wish. So a Make-A-Wish kid came, and his name was Jesse. Jesse was 10 years old, and his body was deformed, and He was on a cart, but he could turn his hand and grab the gear shift. He popped wheelies in that cart. Jesse was awesome. He was an amazing young man, amazing kid. And he just kind of got my heart. He came back the next year. He helped me MC. And he just had this amazing spirit about him. And literally, I was a smoker, and I walked out. I didn't want to smoke in this building. So Neil and I walked outside, and I did say that. I said, Neil, what would Jesse do to have my legs to run in that grass, to have my body for one day? Would he pollute it like we are right now? And I literally threw it out, and I haven't had one since. Now, I chew Nicorette like a madman, occasionally dip some Copenhagen, but my lungs feel great. Okay, my lungs feel awesome. And but as far as the foundation goes, we put on a big golf tournament. But the best fundraising we do is in each individual store. Each individual store during a certain period in the summertime raises money for our foundation, and the top stores get money that comes back to them to spend with things that they find worthwhile in their community. And but yeah, the foundation we've raised probably $2.5 million now since the inception. And every year we put on a golf tournament, do fundraising. We probably raise $125,000 to $150,000 a year. And nobody gets paid on the board. We have a board of directors, so all of the money goes back out.
That's awesome.
It's all kids' causes with the exception of Hope for the Warriors, which is the statue.
Go ahead and talk about this a little bit while you're
Hope for the Warriors is a wonderful organization that not only takes care of our warriors, but also takes care of their families. You may remember a few years ago that there was a Marine training exercise in Hawaii, and the helicopter went down, and I think there were 7 deaths or something like that. Hope for the Warriors had all 7 of those families on a plane heading to Hawaii immediately. They're a wonderful organization, and so that is the one. But to me, they're kids, the ones that go over there and fight for us. And
18, 19, 20
they're
years
kids
old.
to me. So I round them in there too. But we do kids causes, Make-A-Wish, Miracle League, multiple other kids causes, but also we do Hope for the Warriors as well.
So one last question.
Sure.
Or what? And it's not. Well, it is kind of a question.
Hopefully, I'll give you a shorter answer than I
No,
have.
you're good.
So far.
You've been awesome, and I want to be so respectful of your
Oh,
time.
you're good.
So if someone out there today thinking about starting their own business with the craziness that's going on in our world today, what advice, what would you say to them if you had 5, 10, 15 minutes to say, or whatever you would want to say to them? What would be your word of advice to them? How would you encourage them?
First thing, don't do a business plan. Because you'll sit down and you'll do pros and cons, and the cons will always outweigh the pros. All right. Now, you'll never hear that from another person, probably. They'll all say, get your pros and cons there, do your business. No, if you believe in it, when your heart of hearts, all right, and you're willing to work hard and you're willing to take other people with you, you got a shot. You got a shot. You still got to walk in every day, even when it's ugly, even when it's bad, even when things are terrible. You still got to walk in with a positive mental attitude. You got to walk in. You got to have the fortitude to say that this is just a bump in the road. And bumps are part of what makes it challenging. This is fun. Let's figure out a way to win. And but yeah, don't sit down and try to figure out. Don't sit down and do an in-depth unless the bank requires it. But for the most part, that's all it takes. And I say that's all it takes. I mean, obviously there's a little bit more than that, but great attitude, no business plan, focus on if you believe in it, all right, and then get after it and don't let anything sway you from it. And you know what? Be prepared to work however long it takes.
Exactly.
Don't look at a schedule, because if you're trying to make a schedule for yourself, you're going to fail. It is what it is.
Exactly.
So,
well, I tell you what, folks, I have one more announcement to make. When we came over here, we got here early because we wanted to set up. And so Chad and I got here early. We stopped over to your restaurant over here, just right down the road. And we ran into you, and you said, "Hey, well, I've got a podcast room. We've not really ever shot a podcast in it. We are shooting the very first podcast at Hwy55 with
right.
Kenney Moore and with Dylan. Kenny, thank you so much from
Thank
the
you.
bottom of my heart for letting a small time YouTuber that's trying to make a name for himself, that wants to tell the stories, to give encouragement to others, and to give the glory to God where it belongs.
Amen.
But thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank you guys. For those listeners out there, this was, it's a 3.5, 4 hour drive to get here. So it means so much to me that you all would take the effort, take the time to trek down here to Pickletown. Okay, so thank you all for coming too.
You're welcome. Hey, everybody, thank you for joining Fortitude, and we will see you in the next one.